And here on the main stage, I have the pleasure to have David Brunt and Sharon. Here they will talk about Lean House of Dragons, a service center case study. So, David, I will leave the stage with you and Sharon. Nice to see you guys.
Okay, so thanks everybody. Sharon, I think you're muted.
No, I'm fine. I'm on.
Oh, you're not muted. That's good. Okay, so let's see if we can share this screen. Okay, so we're there. Good.
Yeah, we're busy loading.
Oh, one sec. We're really messing this up. There we go. We're on. Right. So we've got half an hour, Sharon, and
Yeah.
we said we'd just have a nice chat, as if nobody was listening.
That's right.
So LGN have recently published your book, Lean House of Dragons, and it tells your story at Ngami Halfway Toyota, and the book uses the lean transformation framework. There's been lots of material on that over the last few hours on the Lean Global Connection. Can you tell me a little bit about Ngami Halfway Toyota and what the book's about? And I'll progress through the slides as you when you tell me to move.
Okay, it's about a dealership in the north of Botswana, wedged right between the Kalahari Desert and the Okavango Delta. It serviced a vast area from the border with Namibia right up towards the Zimbabwe border. Really, the whole north of Botswana was our responsibility to serve in all fields of Toyota. That's the sales, parts, and the service delivery in our workshop, which was probably the larger part of the business. Traditionally, Toyota franchises are sales. We can maybe even go Pareto and say 80% in sales and the rest in service. I don't know if you agree there, Dave, but I would say that most of our work came from, and our general everyday income came from repairing vehicles, which is unusual in Toyota dealerships. It's really always more about the sales side. So it was different. When we started,
but it looks the same. That's what you were saying the other day.
Yeah, it looks the same. Or externally, it's got the glass, shiny glass, and the pretty signs, all neat, looking like Toyota. But internally, it was very different from anything you'd find in Johannesburg. It serviced basically Land Cruisers that had traveled through deep water and heavy sand and abused vehicles. I can only call them abused vehicles. They had worked very hard. All vehicles in that area work very hard. Yeah. So it was one of the things that when you looked at the business, you didn't recognize from the outside. It's only when you go into the business and start to look around, then you start to see that it is very different and a little bit more complicated when it came to running it, because it was unwieldy to run because of its environment. Yeah. High temperatures, very bad internet connections, electricity not working all the time, continually jumping from generator power into mains power. Our water was saline, believe it or not, right next to the delta. So we had to go through desalination just to get drinking water and to run our cooling systems. So it had its own set of challenges that probably other dealerships in cities have not had to deal with.
Yeah. And Botswana, again, has got its, there's a, you've got your company culture, but you've also got your environment in Maun as well, and you had problems finding well trained technicians and all of that kind of stuff as well, didn't you?
Yeah, traditionally in Botswana, we have a very small population, and skills tended to migrate towards Gaborone or to the very lucrative diamond mines. And we were the backwater. We weren't considered in any way where you want to go if you want to get on in life. So we had to fight for skills and to build our own skills with people who lived in Maun. And that was a blessing and a curse at times.
Right. So you wrote this book. Why did you write it?
I wrote it because lean made such a difference, and I wanted to share the difference, and I wanted to show people that even in the environment we were working with, we still were able to do lean, and it made such a vast difference. I wanted to make sure that people knew about it so it would encourage them on their own journey and help them to make the leap. And maybe if they could see, if I could express my own vulnerability, they would also try to understand that they would have to be vulnerable to do this.
Right.
Interesting. To address the emotional side.
Right. So I've just put up the LTF. You used this, didn't you? Do you want to tell us about how you use this and what was your initial thoughts when we presented this to you?
Well, on our first days of training, you, Dave, and Terry went through the basics of lean and how it works and all the different tools we have, and it's the method of doing things. But one of the things you addressed was the Lean Transformation House, and I remember watching it because you actually showed John Shook's little video clip, and I looked at it and I thought, okay, I understand that this is what Halfway Toyota want us to do. But I didn't really comprehend it. It had no depth to me at that time. All I actually did was I looked at the customer mobility at the top, and I thought, well, that's obviously the target. And as a traditional leader, I was used to working to get to a target. And that's how I'd gone up in life as a manager, was to reach targets better than anybody else. And that's how I climbed up in the business to where I was. So I thought, well, that's the target. And I didn't really pay much attention to the rest of it. And then they got to the center of the house. And then I started to look at the center of the house and I thought, ooh, we're really quite dysfunctional in this area. This is a really hard thing for me to do. And so in the beginning, I basically ignored it. And as I tried to work towards the top of the house of the customer mobility, I had a little dragon build in the middle of the house that burnt my ass. Okay, it really did. Because they didn't understand. I was just push. We have to get this lean stuff done. We have to get to this target, or we're not going to make the new shareholders happy. And in my mind, that was what it was about. So it was quite a difficult time for the staff who had gone new into new ownership and had never been through that kind of experience before. And then they had me push all the time to get this done.
Yeah.
It took a lot of coaching to get out of that.
Right. But I mean, that's an interesting reflection. You know, we do this teaching, and we very rarely have such honest feedback, actually, I suspect, as to what people perceive this is about when they start, versus actually what they find out it's about when they get partly through the journey. Just, I mean, moving on, there's 3 lovely photos here, and you know, I've been a few times. I'm gutted that with the coronavirus pandemic we haven't been doing this kind of traveling, because it's wonderful to come to places like this and see and work with people in these kind of environments. But you've got 3 photos on there. Do you want to just talk around those and
Yes,
the story of
Dave,
what people were having to cope with?
Yeah, one of the challenges of trying to reach the top of the roof and the customer mobility was that we were dealing with this environment where you had tar roads, yes, but they didn't cover the entire country. And when the moment you went off a tar road, you went into heavy, deep sand, like the picture, and then through deep waters with these Land Cruisers. And so that really challenged the vehicle. And so technical skills were quite important, and getting through to our staff that we were going to have to provide constant mobility in this kind of environment was one of the things that put pressure on all the staff. And I had quite a lot of kickback from them about it. And working through that one more time, because there was a lack of skills because of our environment and our distance from the capital, and our staff themselves had not had the training that they required to actually deal with this problem and give constant mobility. We just didn't know how to do it. It was one of those things we just didn't know how to do, Dave.
Yeah. I mean,
And
there was some, you know, some unit. I think this is where with any time you try to change, you have to think about what the situation is, and what the problems are that people are facing. I mean, one of the things that struck me going in the workshop was, as you've said, the mix of vehicles, the fact that a far larger proportion were these old style Land Cruisers, and of course some of the service items on those were complete re-greasing of axles, of half shafts, of repacking bearings with grease and all that kind of stuff, which if you went down, I don't know, centre of Manchester, where, you know, down the road from me here, or you even went to Johannesburg, and you went to halfway fourways, that kind of work just is so rare. And yet, actually, it was the bread and butter work of the workshop for you, wasn't it? Really?
Yes, we didn't know it any other way. That was the way it had always been. We had done the heavy work and the long services. Every now and then we got blessed with a brand new vehicle that came in and didn't need very much. But mostly,
unless it had been through the water.
Unless
those modern vehicles, when they go in the water, that's pretty much a disaster, isn't it? Really?
Yes, we had a few new ones go through the water. Hey.
Yeah, but particularly with driven by tourists that don't necessarily know the lie of the land. I mean,
that's right.
I mean, moving on to, obviously I've been involved in this book. So, but when you read the book, I think it's really interesting that you started from the problems to solve. Can you tell us about the problems that you faced and why you think that those were the ones that were so important?
our main problem that we had to face did lie in our workshop facility. Well, it was the one, shall I say, that smacked us over the head every morning. So we had to notice it. And it was just after you and Terry came to the business that the government changed their way of operating, and they decided that they will bring every single Toyota to a Toyota agent that they had in their care. And by distributing them to the different ministries to try and force a responsibility for the care of vehicles to the ministries, because the ministries were not coping well and were running out of vehicles. So they were trying to make the ministries responsible. And the local transport organization that was part of government were then just going to be inspectors and administrators. So what happened was, within a course of maybe 2 weeks, we had 300 vehicles in our yard, because they wanted to get them all repaired all at once. And many of them had come from an environment where they'd been cannibalized, where they needed a part, a starter or a gearbox, and they stripped it out and then put the old one back because it was just cannibalizing. So they were replacing to fix it later. So we had all these vehicles towed into our yard that we didn't know what was wrong with them.
Yeah,
they had
no visibility of them before either. Because they were, as you say, they were basically just using some of these 4 parts. I mean, some of them were almost write-offs, weren't they? In some cases.
Yeah. Eventually, when we started to repair, when you're repairing a vehicle and the starter's not working, then you fix the starter, and then you think, well, that's it. And then you find, oh, well, we couldn't test this vehicle because we couldn't start it. And then you find the engine's not functioning at all. So you fix the engine, and then you find, oh, but the gearbox that they put back actually is stripped. And often it ended up costing more to repair the vehicle than to write it off and buy a new one.
Yeah.
Purely because of the extent of the cannibalization of the vehicles. And to have this flood in our yard was overwhelming for everybody in administration, for the technicians, for the management, because eventually you couldn't even drive in the yard. And the work in progress was just, it went up to over 600 vehicles. Or 600 job cards. Eventually, we didn't know what vehicles we had and which ones we didn't. It was, we were busy drowning in vehicles, drowning in admin, and drowning in our reputation.
Right.
That's how bad it had got.
Yeah. But I mean, you did things pretty quickly, didn't you? So I mean, what in terms of the different things that you did. One of the things to really get the flow going was you established the flow for predictable work, didn't you? Which
yes,
is
that's right.
The Green Bay.
Yeah, we did the Green Bay, which was the first job that after our training, it was the first thing we identified. If you remember, we sifted and we found that there was a portion of new vehicles that actually were not getting proper service. And then we put those into a Green Bay, and it started off at, I think, 30 minutes to get one through. And then we put it into 2-stage, and then it went to 19 minutes. And that made a huge difference, because at least that took that little burden away. At least we knew that the newish vehicles were all going through the system, flowing through the system. And then we could focus our attention on all the rest.
Yeah.
So it was the start.
And coming back to for people that read the book, what you've done is, I think it's very accessible for leaders. Each chapter's concise, and you've got a key message and a takeaway for each chapter. And you talk about this particular bit, but can you tell me about what you think the 3 takeaways are that are important to leaders when they're faced with these kind of challenges?
Well, we couldn't have gone forward without establishing visual management. Visual management there became key to everything, because visual management, it doesn't matter what language you talk. When you can see, it doesn't make if you speak Tswana or you speak Baharero, Damara, or any of the local languages, or you speak English, when you look at a visual, it tells you what's going on. So it crossed those boundaries for us, and it made us able to see how bad it was initially. And by creating all those visuals, we were able to get a grasp on the problem and handle the problem. And the second thing was Kaizen. As we were doing that, we were finding problems to solve.
Yeah.
And by finding those problems to solve, we were implementing Kaizen continuously. And everybody became involved in the Kaizen because it was in the front line with the things that were going wrong. They were giving suggestions of how they needed help and how they could fix it. And so that virtuous circle of improvement came with the front lines and the management by using the visuals. The visuals prompted all those because they identified the problem, and then we could Kaizen the problem out. And then the third maybe for me is flow. You know, like on the Green Bay, when we first got flow in there, the guys couldn't believe it. The customers couldn't believe it. You know, there's an elderly man who came into me and he said, Mafisa, he says, are you sure you serviced the car? Because this was very quick. And for the staff, it just took such a weight off them. And they started to feel, it was the first twinges of flow that came into that. And it was the first building block of going forward and really improving. So
those are three good ones, aren't they? Yeah, those are three good ones. Let's have a look at the visuals then, because I think of all the visuals that I've ever seen, I think this one is probably one of the best anywhere. Just tell people about this. I think you could have maybe have even used a better picture here. I mean, I know the bit on the left-hand side it's a diagram.
Yeah, it's the real thing. That's what it looked like initially. And then on the other side, it's really how it works. What the problem we were trying to solve there was we were on a very dirty wash bay, purely because it was out in the open. We get sandstorms, dust storms. We have salty-ish water, sticky kind of things going on. And the paperwork that we first started with, where we were coloring in, was just getting grubby and dirty, and their hands were wet when they were touching it, and it was just a mess. And so also they were struggling to comprehend the piece of paper to the actual work they were doing. So I decided that we'll build the shelves. I mean, I actually saw it because I saw some interior design for children's bedrooms where they were doing little boys' bedrooms with toy cars all in rows. And I thought, that could work for us. And so we did the shelves, and then we did the time slots, the tack time. And when we did that, they could comprehend what I was trying to do because they had the little marker with the tack that they had to move up when they'd done a cast. So you could see eventually if we were ahead or behind. And because they were physically moving the car, they could correlate the car that they washed with what they were moving. And so it was easy for them to comprehend, because there we had language barriers and education barriers. They couldn't, a lot of those guys, especially the older ones, couldn't read. The young ones could read, but the older ones couldn't read. And on a wash bay, we had quite a lot of elderly ladies doing all the internal work of cleaning inside the cars. So this really helped them to just find a problem, because then they could see, oh, we're behind. Look, we're behind. We need to do something. We need to get somebody to come and help on the wash bay, or who is missing. What can we do to solve the problem? And then they would actually preempt a problem and come and say, I've got a problem on the wash bay. The water's not coming out fast enough,
Right.
or 2 people are off sick. And then you could respond because they could recognize it. Before they didn't. At the end of the day, they just had still lots of cars to wash, so they'd have to work overtime, or people get their cars the next day. So this visual really prompted a response. But what happened was, when we got flow all through the workshop, it was a place I used to go and stand to see how well are we doing. I used to go there on my Gemba twice a day, and I'd go and look, oh, okay, we're on track. Are there any problems? And the supervisors say, no problems today. And then at 3 o'clock, I go and look again and say, oh, what happened? And then we could respond, so we didn't impact customers, so we could keep our alignment to customer ability. So it was one of the, it is my favorite too.
Yeah. Okay. Right. We've only got 5 minutes left, and we've got, well, we could talk about this for hours, couldn't we? There's Lebo, and she's this was all about the information flow, wasn't it? Really, and whether you've got the parts in stock and all of that kind of stuff. And again, was great from a visual management point of view, but also you did this at a certain time during the day to as a team meeting, so that everybody was together and they could all see together, so they could all act and react on the day, type of thing. And then you also had this as well. Do you want to tell us about this? Right, as well.
As we had all these old crocs in the yard, we had to order a lot of special orders because they were old vehicles, and so we actually got lost in the consummate amount of parts that came in, and making sure they were fitted to vehicles. And so this was our visual to say, these parts are on order, it was complete, where is it stored, and then how long has it been sitting there not fitted to a vehicle. And the tallies were done every day, so that you could see there, like on the visual, you could see that that's been there now for 2.5 months. We haven't completed the work. Why not? What's happened? So it was one of the ways we brought down our WIP, our work in progress, but it was also a way of communicating again about the problem.
And basically getting a flow. I mean, that's what you were really trying to do.
It was all about getting flow.
Yeah. Okay. Right. And then you did lots of great Kaizen. I mean, this picture here with the wheel.
Yes.
What there's an underlying principle here behind that particular tool, isn't there? Around making it easy for the worker.
Yeah, it was make it easier for the worker, because we couldn't have done the vehicles in 10 minutes without each wheel having one of those, because the technicians physically wouldn't be able to cope. So we built that ourselves so that they could cope and we could get it done.
Yeah.
And it improved our workshop by 20%.
Yeah. Okay, so you I mean, in the book you call Ngami the dragon, don't you?
Yes.
And you've there's lots of little pieces that, as I said before, each chapter has got a very simple, a really clear message to it. And you talk about the day the dragon danced, but you also talk about reflecting and the reflection, and I wondered whether you wanted to talk about that. That appears key in what you're doing.
Guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So sorry, your time is up.
Oh, is it?
We're already over. We
Okay.
are starting the next session already. So I will have to say bye to you too.
Just before we do, Christopher, advert, Amazon.com, DPBO9LD or whatever it is. Go and buy the book. That's the advert. It's a great book.
We have more information about the book in the expo.
And it's
So
in
if
the
you want to know
expo,
more about, go to the expo.
In the
Thank you
expo.
guys. Bye.
Yes,
Okay,
bye.
bye.